Most women have no idea what begins to awaken inside them when they stop giving their body away. There is a hush that descends, not the absence of noise, but the stillness of reclamation. The mind quiets from chasing, the nervous system softens from performing, and in that silence, when the body no longer plays puppet to approval, the soul begins to stir, like a forgotten goddess in a sealed temple, rising from beneath layers of conditioning, shame, and silent yearning. The modern world has sold the feminine a lie, that freedom is found in access, that empowerment lies in indulgence. But Carl Jung would argue otherwise. He might suggest that what the unconscious longs for isn't more stimulation, but integration. That what the anima seeks is not the validation of being wanted, but the sovereignty of self-knowing. Abstinence is not repression, it is the sacred pause. The pregnant silence before a soul speaks its first clear truth. It is the still chamber in which the woman meets herself not as a body to be consumed, but as a mystery to be unveiled, because the body, for so many women, has become a battlefield. Touched too soon, offered too freely, it becomes numb, not out of coldness, but out of protection. When you give too much of what is sacred, too often, and to the unworthy, the soul begins to retreat. She hides beneath the skin, behind the eyes. Under the smile, she watches, she waits, she withholds. But when you choose to stop truly, stopped you will feel the shift. You will begin to see the hunger beneath the touch, the projection behind the compliments. You will no longer feel flattered when he says, "I want you." You will feel studied, watched, hunted, and you will begin to ask, why does he want me? What part of me does he see? Is it the real me, or only the part that dances for his fantasy? In the silence of abstinence, the illusions dissolve. You stop chasing his attention and start tracing your own hunger. And then something terrifying happens, something beautiful. You realize how much of your worth was anchored to being chosen, how much of your identity was built upon the eyes that looked at you with desire. And suddenly, you are unlearning centuries of survival. The woman who abstains is not weak. She is not afraid. She is remembering. She is retrieving the parts of herself that were traded for breadcrumbs of affection. She is no longer handing over her body like a business card, hoping to be seen, hoping to be held. She is no longer searching for divinity between the hands of men who have never held their own shadow. Abstinence, in this sacred light, is not about denying pleasure, it is about elevating it. It is the soul's rebellion against being reduced. It is a spiritual fast from distortion. You stop letting yourself be consumed in hopes of being kept. You stop offering yourself as medicine to men who do not want to heal, and the silence begins to speak. She speaks through the dreams, vivid, wild, sometimes unsettling. She speaks through the rage you didn't know you buried, through the grief that swells like a tide at the center of your chest. She speaks through the sudden craving for solitude, for books, for the woods, for a softness you forgot you deserved. You begin to see what you traded. Not just time, not just affection, but power. The power to choose, the power to discern, the power to say, no, not until you see me, not until you see more than hips and lips and curves, but the soul behind the gaze, the one who bleeds, and breaks and births worlds, the one who has seen lifetimes of betrayal and still stands, soft, open. Sovereign. The silence teaches you that your body is not a transaction. It is a temple, and every man who enters must come barefoot, with reverence, with offerings, because you are hard to get, but because you are hard to forget. The more silent the body becomes, the louder the soul roars, and the world unaccustomed to a woman who needs nothing from its gaze, will try to shame you. They will call you frigid, closed off, prudish, but in truth, they are afraid. Because a woman who does not chase attention is a woman who commands it, and a woman who no longer needs your touch to feel wanted becomes untouchable in ways no hand can reach. So stay in the silence, feel the discomfort as detox, feel the longing as prayer, and feel the awakening as the return of something ancient, something holy, something no man can earn but only witness, if he is worthy. When the body goes silent, the world reveals its noise. And in that noise, the endless seduction of screens, scrolling. Validation there lies, the mirror of what the soul has been forced to compete with. Desire, in its rawest form, is not the enemy. But unconscious desire is a storm that drowns. It pulls women into the undertow of their own longing, making them believe that being desired is the same as being seen. But Jung would remind us that projection precedes perception, and far too often, what others love in you is only what they cast upon your form, not who you truly are beneath the surface of skin. A man who says, "You're everything I want," may simply be projecting a fantasy carved from his own unmet needs. And if you give yourself to that projection too soon, you become trapped in his illusion, not seen in your essence. You become the drug to his ego, a symbol, a salve, not a soul. But when abstinence becomes your ground, when you stop reaching, stop offering, stop rushing, you begin to see with different eyes. You see the emptiness behind the flirtation, the spiritual bankruptcy behind the grand gestures, the boy in the man's body, the ghost of his mother's approval still haunting his gaze. This is where your own inner alchemy begins, because abstinence is not just the withholding of sex, is the discipline of self. It is the inner marriage of your wounded feminine and your protective masculine. The part of you that once begged for love now bows only to truth. The part of you that once gave away touch in exchange for presence now waits, watches, and listens. You will notice how your body, once so willing to betray you for attention, begins to harden not in coldness, but in discernment. The womb is no longer a marketplace. It becomes a gate, and only those who bring more than longing will ever be invited in. As your energy is no longer leaking through desperation, it begins to rise. You become magnetic in ways no makeup or lace, or carefully curated post can replicate. Men sense it. Some are drawn like moths to flame. Others are repelled by a power they cannot possess. But none can ignore it. This is the point at which you must stand firm, because the tests will come. The charming text, the sweet lies dipped in poetry, the invitations that speak to your loneliness, not your wholeness. You must ask yourself, is this love or a lesson in disguise? Is this intimacy or simply access dressed as affection? To abstain is not to reject love. It is to make space for its real form to find you. Not the performance of love, not the theater of seduction. Love that sees you in silence. Love that does not need your body to validate its depth. Love that waits. And in that waiting, you become more than woman you. Become woman remembered. The woman who turned inward instead of outward. The woman who stopped handing over her soul in hopes of being held. The woman who returned to her own bones, her own breath, and found that what she had been seeking was never a man, but a mirror. The feminine, in her raw, wild truth, is not passive. She is not submissive in the way the world has taught. She is receptive, but not to everyone. She is open, but not to the uninitiated. She is vulnerable, but only to the worthy. In abstinence, she becomes sacred again. She no longer begs for the text back. She no longer anxiously waits for a man to choose her. She no longer dresses her body in sorrow disguised as seduction. Instead, she builds a sanctuary around her energy. She walks like someone who knows the soul is the most erotic thing about her. Men who see only her curves will walk away. Let them. Men who need her broken to feel whole will disappear. Let them. Men who only approach when they sense her hunger will fade when they realize she is fed. Let them. Because the woman who has met her soul in silence will never again trade it for noise. As the soul emerges from the silence, she brings with her a clarity that cuts through illusion like morning sun through mist. No longer diluted by the frantic need to be desired, the woman begins to see herself not as an ornament to be admired, but as a force to be reckoned with. She remembers what the world tried so hard to make her forget, that her worth was never something another could give it, was something she had to reclaim. In Jungian terms, abstinence is not an absence, but an integration. The withdrawal from physical gratification becomes the descent into the unconscious. It is there in the depths of the shadow that the feminine meets the wounded girl still living inside her. The one who gave herself too quickly, the one who begged for touch because she thought it meant love, the one who mistook attention for connection. And in that meeting, something holy happens. She does not shame the girl. She holds her. She whispers, "You are doing what you thought would keep you safe, but you are safe now. We don't have to ache to feel alive anymore." The modern world teaches women to ignore their intuition, to override their subtle no. But in silence, the body becomes a sacred compass again. She whispers before she screams. She retracts before she rebels. When you abstain, you begin to hear her clear, calm, commanding. This man, no. This touch, not yet. This energy, too hungry. This compliment, coated in ego. This gaze, not rooted in reverence. And when you honor that voice, the soul expands. You no longer betray yourself to avoid being alone. You no longer lie to your body in order to satisfy someone else's desire. And you begin to notice what once felt like love now feels like loss of self. The difference becomes unbearable. And that is your liberation. You learn that abstinence is not about rules. It's not about control. It's about calibration. You are tuning your body back to truth. You are no longer moved by men who move fast. You are no longer impressed by promises whispered in the dark. You want presence, not performance. You want penetration of soul, not just of flesh. And you begin to realize that most men were never making love to you, they were making love to the fantasy of you. The image, the idea, the projection. You were just the screen, so you stop playing the role. You walk off that stage. You take off the costume, stitched together from centuries of male longing and female silence. And you return to the sacred choreography of your own becoming, the slow, deliberate dance of the woman who does not rush. The world will test you, not with loneliness, but with illusion. It will tempt you with breadcrumbs of affection, hoping you'll settle. It will offer you men who are almost what you asked for, just enough to doubt your standards, not enough to fulfill them. It will whisper, "Isn't this better than being alone?" But you will know better, because you have tasted your own wholeness, because you have felt the power of not needing, because you have seen what happens when your body no longer plays pawn to an uninitiated heart. Abstinence becomes less about what you're withholding and more about what you're protecting. Your energy, your time, your softness, your wildness, all of it sacred, all of it rare, all of it yours. You become the woman who no longer gives her magic to men who have not earned the right to witness it. Not because you are bitter, not because you are guarded, but because you know, when the wrong man touches the right woman, it leaves bruises the eye cannot see. And when the right man touches the right woman, it awakens something that cannot be faked. So you wait, not passively, but fiercely. You wait as the queen waits not for rescue, but for resonance. You wait as the storm waits, full of power, full of calm, choosing where to strike, and in that waiting, your soul becomes undeniable. There comes a moment when the silence inside a woman stops being empty. It begins to sing, not with the lullaby of longing, but with the hymn of return. She no longer waits by the window for a knock. She no longer rehearses her laughter to be likable, or mutes her brilliance to seem easy. Something ancient is rising now, not loud, not fast, but steady, certain, and deeply rooted in her bones. The woman who abstains becomes a mirror to clean for most to face, because she sees through charm, she sees through promises. She sees the boy beneath the man, the wound beneath the flirtation, the fear behind the pursuit, and she no longer molds herself to soothe it. She no longer volunteers her softness as salvation. Abstinence reveals the power of absence, not as punishment, but as revelation. When she pulls her energy away, when her touch is no longer on offer, when her body is no longer currency, she sees what remains, what collapses, what panics, what vanishes, and in that unraveling, she gathers the truth. You see, for centuries, women were taught that their value was tied to availability, to serve, to surrender. But the soul knows better. The soul knows that absence, too, is a form of presence. That when you withhold yourself not out of fear, but out of discernment, you become more visible than ever before. The man who is shallow will grow louder. The man who is unworthy will grow restless. The man who cannot meet your depth will begin to distract, deflect, and detour. But the man who is ready, truly ready, will not be confused by your silence. He will not demand access. He will not take your restraint personally. He will recognize it for what it is, sovereignty, because the man who has faced his own shadow will know what it means for a woman to protect hers. He will not rush to possess you. He will wait to be invited. And in that patience, something radical is born: respect. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the path to becoming whole. But what most forget is that you cannot become whole while fragmenting yourself for others. Abstinence is not just a rejection of touch, it is a retrieval of soul. It is the spiritual discipline of becoming undivided. In this season, you begin to live in the ache. You begin to make peace with the hunger that once ruled you. You begin to hold yourself through the moments that used to send you running back into familiar arms. And you realize, I can survive desire. I can survive emptiness. I can survive not being wanted, as long as I do not abandon myself. This is where the transformation deepens. You begin to feel the subtle shifts. Your posture changes. Your voice lowers not in weakness, but in gravity. Your gaze sharpens. Your presence lingers. You no longer try to be beautiful. You are beauty remembered, not because you wear it, but because you embody it. And beauty, in its purest form, cannot be captured. It can only be experienced. This is why so many grow frustrated with you. You cannot be possessed. You do not chase. You do not bend. You do not entertain what drains you, even if it flatters. You choose peace over passion that burns too fast. You choose solitude over company that costs your soul. You choose quality over quantity, depth over drama, and resonance over reaction. And in this choosing, you step into your full expression, not as a woman who withholds, but as a woman who decides. Because abstinence, when it is chosen from power and not pain, becomes erotic. It is the slow burn of anticipation. It is the unspoken yes that has not yet been given. It is the sacred gate that says, I will not open for the unworthy. I will not break for the impatient. I will not bloom for the blind. And when the world tells you you're being too much, too guarded, too high maintenance, you smile, because you remember that anything sacred is always misunderstood by those who cannot see beyond the surface. Let them call you a mystery. Let them wonder what it would take to be let in. You owe no one an explanation for your standards. You owe only yourself the truth of your becoming. The woman who abstains becomes untouchable not because she is cold, but because she is consecrated. Her energy, once scattered in the ache to be loved, now flows inward like a tide returning to source. She is no longer waiting to be noticed. She notices herself. And that awareness births a new kind of power, quiet, watchful, and impossibly magnetic. The soul begins to weave threads of memory, instinct, and wisdom together into a cloak of discernment. And through that fabric, she sees what she never dared to name, that much of what she once called intimacy was really invasion, that what passed for affection was often a transaction, that the warmth she felt in his touch was not love but relief, fleeting and hungry. The body, when given to isolate, learns to brace, to comply, to perform. But the body, when honored, becomes oracular. It speaks in sensations, in silences, in the subtle tensing of shoulders or the softening of the womb. And in abstinence, she listens. She learns the difference between this feels good and this feels right. She learns that craving is not always clarity, that arousal is not always alignment, that the body's yes must be more than must be rooted. Jung taught that the feminine unconscious is not weak but wild, and wildness does not equate to recklessness. True wildness is governed by the moon, by cycles, by intuition. It is knowing when to open and when to close, when to wait and when to leap, when to kiss him, when to walk away without looking back. In this space of chosen abstinence, the feminine does not shrink. She expands. She becomes more erotic, not less, because her sensuality is no longer a gift for the world to take, but a fire she stokes for herself. She no longer gives away her longing, hoping it will be reciprocated. She holds it like a sacred ember, waiting for someone who will not just warm their hands, but tend the flame. The woman who has been broken by unearned intimacy and has chosen silence in its place begins to feel the architecture of her inner kingdom rising again. Stone by stone, she rebuilds her self-respect, not loud, not vengeful, just clear, just whole. She no longer accepts presence that is partial, love that is conditional, or men who want her crown without carrying their own sword. And the world, still dripping in fast love and shallow worship, will not understand her. They will say she is difficult. They will say she is intimidating. They will say she is too much. But what they really mean is, she is no longer for sale. This is where the soul becomes sovereign, when she no longer trades herself to be wanted. She becomes witnessed, not as a possession, but as a presence. And in that witnessing, the right man will not seek to conquer but to meet. He will not chase her in conquest. He will approach her in communion. And she, no longer starving, will be able to see him, not through the veil of unmet need, but through the clarity of her own healed vision. She will not ask, will he stay? She will ask, can he sit in? the silence with me? Can he meet her in the quiet, when there is no performance left, no seduction, no mask, just the raw ache of being known? If he can, he stays. If he cannot, she does not follow. Because the woman who has met herself in abstinence has already faced the worst. Her own fear of not being chosen. Her own belief that worthiness must be proved through sacrifice. Her own willingness to betray herself for belonging. And she has survived it. More than survived it. She has been resurrected by it. So now, she no longer gives the audition. She holds the throne. She is no longer available to those who approach with hunger but not honor. She is no longer softened by sweet words spoken from shallow hearts. She is no longer impressed by promises, only presence. And in that stillness, she waits not because she must, but because she can. There is a silence that falls, not from absence, but from knowing. A woman who has walked through her hunger and chosen herself no longer explains her boundaries. She embodies them. Her no is not an argument, it is a mirror, and only those who see themselves clearly in its reflection will dare to stay. She no longer bleeds for those who haven't earned her softness, no longer confuses her ability to feel deeply with a duty to heal what is broken in others. Abstinence has taught her the difference between being a lover and being a wound bearer, between carrying a man through his storms and waiting for one who has already weathered his own. Her heart, once eager to merge, is now a gate of discernment, and this time the key is not desire, it is devotion, not the frantic kind, not the performative kind, not the kind that flatters and fades, but devotion that is carved from consistency, forged in depth, and sealed in self-awareness. The kind of devotion that does not fear her silence, but honors it. Because the woman who abstains has stopped playing the game of proximity. She no longer collects bodies to ease the ache. She does not need to be held to feel whole. She holds herself. And that kind of woman terrifies the world, terrifies those who confuse pleasure with presence, terrifies those who equate conquest with connection, terrifies those who have only known the feminine in her pleasing, not her power. But to the man who has done his own descent, she is not terrifying, she is familiar. He recognizes her stillness because he has sat in his own. He recognizes her boundaries because he has bled to build his own. He sees her silence and does not rush to fill it, but joins her there, unafraid to meet the truth that rises in its wake. They speak without words, not in fantasy, but in frequency, because the soul doesn't need sentences, needs safety, it needs space. It needs stillness to rise, to reveal, to unfold. And this woman, now fully seated in herself, no longer rushes the process. She is not in a hurry to be claimed. She is not looking to be saved. She is not waiting to be completed. She is whole, not perfect but present, not hardened but held, not closed but consecrated. The body no longer craves what drains it. The mind no longer spins stories around scraps. The heart no longer leaps for crumbs. There is no desperation left, only discernment. No begging, only boundaries. No chasing, only choosing. And in this space, love becomes something new. Not a game, not a fix, not a fever, but a garden. And she does not throw seeds into the wind. Anymore, she waits for soil that has been tilled, for hands that have built something of their own. She is not asking for a man to complete her, but to meet her in the sacred ground between their healed selves. This is where the myth breaks, where the old archetypes dissolve, where the maiden becomes queen not by wearing a crown, but by no longer asking for one. She gives herself what no man ever could. Sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, she creates, she builds, she writes, she rests. She dances, she heals. Her energy becomes a temple, not a transaction. And those who once sought to take now stand outside, unsure of how to enter, because the old keys no longer fit. Flattery no longer opens her. Affection no longer distracts her. The old patterns of seduction fall flat against the walls she has rebuilt in reverence. What opens her now is presence, integrity, patience, power that does not dominate, but honors. And when, at last, she chooses to open, not because she is lonely, not because she is pressured, not because she is chased, but because something inside her says, yes, it is not a surrender, but an offering, a gift, a sacred unveiling, a reunion, not with a man, but with the part of herself that once believed she had to give herself away in order to be loved. Now she gives only from fullness, and in that giving she is never emptied. And so, in the silence she once feared, the woman finds the voice she never knew she had. It is not loud, it does not beg to be heard, but it carries weight. The weight of centuries of forgotten wisdom. The weight of every time she was told her body was her only worth. The weight of every moment she betrayed herself in the name of love, only to be left holding the shards of her own devotion. Now, she does not offer her body in hopes of being chosen. She offers her presence and waits to see who can hold it without flinching. The girl she once was would have mistaken this power for loneliness. But the woman she has become knows. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. It is, in fact, the place where everything false falls away, and only the sacred remains. And in that sacred space, she no longer desires to be worshipped. She desires to be witnessed, not through the lens of desire, but through the clarity of soul recognition. She wants to be known in the way the forest knows the wind, not by force, not by fire, but by familiarity. She wants to be seen without having to undress. She wants to be held without having to ache. She wants to be loved in the places she never knew were lovable. But she no longer demands it. She simply becomes it. And in becoming, she attracts not attention, but alignment. Not hands that reach, but hearts that stay. Not men who want to consume her, but men who are ready to co-create, because she has stopped giving out pieces of herself, hoping someone will complete the puzzle. She has realized she is the entire picture, and the only man worthy of her is the one who sees it clearly, not through fantasy, but through reverence. This is what abstinence was always meant to awaken, not just a refusal, but a remembrance. Not a wall, but a womb. Not a void, but a vessel. And she has filled that vessel with her own light, her own laughter, her own longing, now transformed into self-possession. The woman who abstains is not empty, she is full of herself, and that fullness makes her holy, not by religion, but by ritual. The ritual of saying no to anything that drains her. The ritual of silence. The ritual of waiting. The ritual of choosing. And in the choosing, she births a new paradigm. No longer does she chase. No longer does she convince. No longer does she explain her standards to those who mock them. She simply is. And from that grounded, rooted, radiant place, she calls in only what resonates. She draws toward her only that which respects her depth. She surrounds herself with those who understand that her abstinence was never about fear, it was about frequency. Because the body, when it goes silent, does not retreat, it refines. And in that refinement, the soul takes center stage, no longer masked, no longer muted, no longer starving, just sovereign, and when the right one comes, he will not see her silence as rejection. He will see it as an invitation to slow down, to step in, to meet her not at the level of the skin, but at the level of the sacred. And if he cannot, she will not flinch, she will not ache, she will not mourn the loss, because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.